Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host Matthew Balzer. Today is August the 20th. It is Monday. We are back on the air. And a special shout out to Mr. Cody Baker for the share on Facebook. We always appreciate everybody that shares our broadcasts. So today we are going to catch you up with a minor trade, a couple of minor signings, and then we're going to jump into our 31 teams in 31 days with the Vegas Golden Knights. I definitely am not ready to rumble, but let's get going. Matt, talk to us about the minor trade and catch us up to date with what's going on.
I think Vegas's opening ceremony is still going on with the Cup Finals. Oh man, but yeah, a few minor deals over the weekend, but most of them today. Former Vancouver Canuck Hunter Shinkaruk, who was with the Flames, was traded to the Montreal Canadiens for Kirby Reichel. Both of those guys then were both signed to 1-year, 2-way deals by each team. Reichel, I think, could potentially still could make the Flames on their bottom six. Shinkaruk, I think he's more just an American League player who might get a call up by the Canadiens. But hey, as the joke is, the Habs always like their small forwards for some reason. But and then the Edmonton Oilers signed Jakub Jurabek to a 1-year deal. The money still hasn't been disclosed yet, but he split the year between Montreal and Washington, got into 36 games, had 2 goals, 8 points, and got into 2 playoff games for the Washington Capitals. He was their 7th, 8th defenseman. But he also had 11 points in 17 games in the American League. But he'll be the defenseman that will be replacing Andrej Sekera with his injury. And the Oilers also signed Scotty Upshall to a professional tryout. He had 19 points in 63 games for the Blues. As Canucks fans will remember, the Canucks brought him in on a tryout last year before he ended up actually going back to the Blues, who he played for the previous year. And lastly, Chris Versteeg has signed in the KHL. Going overseas to play this year. Only played 24 games for the Flames last year, dealing with a whole bunch of injuries throughout the year.
So now that St. Louis has all the intel on the inner workings of the Vancouver Canucks, they sent Scotty Upshall to try out for the Edmonton Oilers this year. And wouldn't it be ironic, though, if he re-signs with St. Louis? I guess it depends if Dante Fabro's knee holds up, right? Or sorry, Robbie Fabry. Say that 10 times fast, right? I wonder if his knee goes again, you'll see how fast it takes them to sign Scotty Upshall for sure. But let's get into the Vegas Golden Knights. Expansion team last year, took everybody by storm. Everybody, was saying, when are they going to come down from being number 1 in the division? They end up taking the lead in the division and held on the rest of the year. Had an incredible playoff run. Let's get into it. Let's talk about their forwards. But before we do that, let's touch on Coach of the Year, GM of the Year, Gerard Gallant and George McPhee.
I know, yeah, just an unbelievable year. I still can't believe how Vegas got all the way to the Cup Finals. It's just like as the year went along, it's just like they'll come back down to earth. Playoffs start, the Kings are gonna win, and then they move on, and then sweeping teams, beating them easily in one goal games and stuff. And then it's just like each round, I was just like, they'll get eliminated now. But until they got all the way to the Cup final, it's an unbelievable expansion year for Vegas. Gerard Gallant, he was left on the side of a street by the Florida Panthers the year before, and then now, this coach, an unbelievable style, an aggressive attacking style that really went well with all the players that George McPhee brought in with some amazing trades. They really did a good job of identifying which players they wanted in the draft. And a lot of those guys overachieved this year, above expectations. to one of the best years ever by an expansion team.
Minnesota, Columbus, and Florida, of course, still feeling the effects of really poor trades with Las Vegas. But also, Abbotsford-born boy Ryan Craig picked up as the assistant coach for last season after a career-ending knee injury and winning in the AHL the year before with the Cleveland Monsters. So a little bit of BC connection there. Let's jump into the forwards with why don't you start us off? Talk about the potential lineup that they're going to have this year, and we'll jump into the rest of their lineup.
All right. So their big line will be Jonathan Marchessault, William Karlsson, and Riley Smith. So I'll go over the stats of what they had with Marchessault in Florida, and Smith also in Florida, and Karlsson in Columbus. Some of these stats I brought up before, but it's still worth mentioning over again. Karlsson only had 6 goals and 25 points in 81 games in Columbus, and then had 43 goals and 78 points in 82 games, and another 15 points in 20 playoff games. Riley Smith only had 15 goals and 37 points in 80 games for Florida last year. He ended up getting 22 goals and 60 points in only 67 games, and had another 22 points in 20 playoff games. And Marchessault had 30 goals and 51 points in 75 games for Florida. And this year, he had 27 goals and 75 points in 77 games, and another 21 points in 20 playoff games. So just some amazing jump in totals, especially William Karlsson. This line, they love to attack, just driving the other teams mad with how fast they can move the puck and get on you. And Karlsson was one of the best two-way centers in the NHL. I believe he won the Lady Bean Trophy. But yeah, those guys have showed amazing chemistry from the beginning of the season all the way to the Stanley Cup final. The second line is I have as Thomas Tatar, Paul Stastny, and Alex Tuch. Paul Stastny, their big free agent signing, which for the Winnipeg Jets, that's a huge disappointment not getting Paul Stastny re-signed. But with bringing Stastny in, that gives them a lot more center depth, as we saw with Washington this year, this past year with Backstrom, Kuznetsov, and Eller down the middle. They wanted to add more depth down the middle, and Stastny will bring that. Alex Tuch had a really good breakout year for his rookie season. Started off in the minors, but it didn't take long for them to bring him up. He ended up with 37 points last season, and should move into the top 6 this year. And Tatar, we'll see how things go. He was in and out of the lineup in the regular season and in the playoffs. He had 20 goals and 34 points last year during the season. And hopefully he can break through and get back to what he was with Detroit a couple of years ago. The third line I have is Thomas Nosek, Erik Haula, and Ryan Carpenter. Haula is another guy I'll bring up for his point totals. Last year, the year prior in Minnesota, he only had 15 goals and 26 points. And this year he had 29 goals and 55 points during the season. So another huge breakthrough. He was a second-line center. And Nosek, I think, who played mostly on the fourth line, I think he could make the jump onto that third line. His American League numbers were great when he was in the Detroit system. He was like a point-a-game player. He was like a Calder Cup MVP down in Grand Rapids. And Ryan Carpenter was brought in off waivers from the San Jose Sharks, and he really had a good season with 15 points in 52 games. But in the playoffs, he stepped up his game as well, and could crack into that bottom 6 on that third line. The fourth line, there's about 6 players vying for this bottom fourth line, but I have it as Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, Cody Eakin, and Ryan Reeves, and his new big contract. I still can't believe he's getting paid over $2.5 million a year just to fight, basically. But Bellemare and Eakin are really good penalty kill forwards. and Reeves bringing some toughness. But in the playoffs, he ended up producing once when he got in, which was one of the big surprises. But the other guys I'll be in and out of the lineup, Oscar Lindberg, who I thought was actually going to have more of a breakout year in Vegas. Only had 9 goals and 11 points in 63 games. But the year previous with the Rangers, he had a really good year. So I'm not sure between Tatar and Nosek, those guys, he could get into that top 6 or on that third line. And the other guys are Daniel Carr, who they brought in from Montreal, and William Carrier, another tough guy who was in the playoffs, but he only played about just half the season for them.
Yeah, for me, obviously William Karlsson was a huge surprise with his breakout season and a career year points-wise. Marchessault and Smith weren't as surprising to me, but I know they surprised a lot of other people. I really liked them with Florida, and I actually thought that they were both going to have breakout seasons in Florida. Obviously, they ended up in Vegas and had an amazing year. Alex Tuch really surprised me. I really liked this guy's game a lot. He was big and strong, and I didn't know a lot about him until, obviously, we started seeing more of the Vegas games throughout the season. Ryan Carpenter, great pickup through the San Jose waivers. And Ryan Reeves, to me, he's not just a fighter. I mean, he's a deterrent. He keeps the other team honest. And he can skate. He really can. He adds some team speed. Like, this is what Vegas is known for, is that team speed all over the front line there. And William Carrier, I think, had an amazing playoff run until he hurt his shoulder, which forced him out. And he couldn't get back in because of the way other guys stepped up and played. So, they had the 10th best power play in the league. They had the 10th best penalty killing in the league. They all bought into the system of Gerard Gallant, it seemed. And they have – I was looking at their lineup. The majority of their team is between the age of 27 and 23. So they're all kind of right in that mid-20s zone. And it's consistent throughout their lineup. Other than a couple of guys that are in their 30s, they seem to be a team that have been put together that can grow together and succeed together as they continue to add now through the draft some more youth for future for sure. Maybe touch on a couple of salary cap forwards that they still have going into this season before I touch on the defense.
So they still have that amazing David Clarkson contract that Dave Nonis gave out. That's still another 2 years at $5.25 million. But he'll go on the long-term injured reserve, so that will go off the cap. But they also have a $2 million cap hit for Derek Brassard, who was part of that three-way deal with Pittsburgh and the Ottawa Senators. So another $2 million against the cap hit. With Vegas, what they have for salary, they can afford to have those extra contracts.
Yeah, well, let's get into their defense, and then we'll bring it home into their goaltending and some prospects. So defense-wise, one of my favorite up-and-coming defensemen used to play for Buffalo, got picked up by the LA Kings, so I started to hate him just because the way he plays. He's big, he's physical, and he's solid guy in his own end. Brayden McNabb, Mr. two-way, and he scored the big overtime goal against his former team, which was fun to watch. I've got him on the first pair with Nate Schmidt, who of course came over from the Washington Capitals and wanted so badly to beat his old team in that Stanley Cup final. But a lot of talent between those two guys, very dependable. They can both play offensively and defensively. And their second pairing I've got as Aldergrove's very own Shea Theodore, who of course was in Aldergrove this last weekend for the opening of the new Aldergrove Arena, which looks beautiful. That's another side note altogether. But for us in Vancouver market, that arena looks like a great place to strap on the skates. I got him with Derek Anglin, the Las Vegas's very own. He'll have another year or two left under his belt, as he does bring a lot of experience. He does bring some toughness along with Brayden McNabb on that ice. So Nick Holden, who they signed as a free agent from the Boston Bruins, will round out their third pairing with Colin Miller, who's really steady, who they got from the New Jersey Devils. And those 6 are a pretty solid 6 defense pair at both ends of the ice. I see a lot of both offensive and defensive opportunity for these guys. Anglin's probably the only one that I don't see offensively, but he's super solid defensively. And then 3 guys will be battling for ice time if any injuries happen. Brad Hunt, who got in he got in just over 40 games last year. John Merrill, who started in the playoffs, but got pulled out once some changes happened and Lucas Sabiza got healthy. And then Griffin Reinhart, who I think the Edmonton Oilers are still kicking themselves because it could have been Matt Barzal. But Griffin Reinhart is kind of their 9th guy. I don't think he will get any ice time with the big club, as he'll probably be down in the AHL because of some of the prospects that they've got. What do you see on their defense? I know you've got some interesting stats that you want to bring up as well, and then bring us into the goaltending.
All right. Yeah, so first off, Shea Theodore still needs a new contract. He had 29 points in 61 games and another 10 points in 20 playoff games. But the biggest thing here was that to start the year, the Vegas had such a logjam of NHL contracts. No worries. They had such a logjam of NHL contracts for defensemen. And since he didn't need waivers, they sent him down to the American League. He had 5 goals and 11 points in only 8 games. And eventually it's just like, yeah, they got to get this guy up. Even before the season, I thought this guy was going to be their best defenseman. And when he got sent down, it was just like it was just a numbers game. But as soon as he came up, he had a breakout year. Another Anaheim Ducks first round pick. Anaheim with a lot of their defense draft picks are just all really good. So the 2 defensemen I want to bring up is Colin Miller and Nate Schmidt. Miller only had 6 goals and 13 points in 61 games for Boston. And this year he had 10 goals and 41 points in 82 games and another 7 points in 20 playoff games. And Nate Schmidt for Washington only had 17 points in 60 games. And this year he had 5 goals and 36 points in 76 games. So another 2 defensemen that really took that big, huge step forward. I know Washington was really disappointed to lose Schmidt because especially in the playoffs prior, I think with some of the injuries they had, he really stepped up in that series against Toronto. And was one of their star players, I believe, from what I remember from that playoff series. Derek Englund, I think, was the one guy that really surprised me. Like when he was with Calgary, he just seemed like he was set to retire. He didn't really fit in, and when he was in the lineup, he wasn't really productive or doing much. But in Vegas, I think after when he gave that huge speech after the disappointing incident in Vegas, the team really rallied behind him and the team, and he had a really good solid defensive year for Vegas, and he got a 1-year extension out of it because of how well he played.
37 years old going into this season. I think this will probably be it for him, but you never know. I mean, he is, like I said, he's a solid stay-at-home defenseman. A lot of guys don't want to go to the front of the net with him around. Now, what can we say about their goaltending? The Flower absolutely had a career year, unbelievable in the playoffs, and trying to prove a point to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I don't know, yeah, just crazy. He passed the 400 win mark late last year with that, and only at the age of 33. He will keep racking up the wins, and if it wasn't for a couple concussion injuries, he probably would have had a 40-plus win season. But last year he ended up getting 29 wins in 46 games, .927 save percentage, and 4 shutouts. And in the playoffs, he had another 13 wins. Let me see here. Totally. Oh, yeah, same save percentage, .927. I thought I wrote down the wrong thing. .927 save percentage and another 4 shutouts. But, yeah, in the playoffs, he was the best goalie, I would think, from start to finish. Unfortunately, in the Stanley Cup final, he started to fall off, but he wasn't getting a whole lot of help at points in that series. But if it wasn't for the fall off in the Stanley Cup final, that was probably one of the best goalie performances I've seen since probably Jonathan Quick back when the Kings won their first Stanley Cup against the Devils. About like one goalie just basically carrying the team on his back and like basically only letting in a goal or less, just standing on his head. But yeah, Fleury's one of my favorite goalies in the league. His personality is awesome. But yeah, he's just an awesome person and goalie. The backup position for Vegas, I think it will be a bit of a battle. I know Malcolm Subban won out last year, but he went 13-4-2 in 22 games and had a 91 save percentage. But another prospect that they had that got into 3 NHL games before he got hurt, which is another big thing for Vegas. They used 5 goalies last year with all the injuries. But Oscar Dansk won all 3 of his games that he played. 9.46 save percentage and one shutout. But in the minors, he went 13-3-2 with a 9.18 save percentage down in the American League, and he could be pushing Subban for the backup role this year. Just because I think he might need waivers this year, so it'll be interesting to see what Vegas does there. And Maxime Lagacé, who got into 16 games last year, went 6-7-1, who's their 4th stringer. His numbers weren't particularly great, but I think he only had an 8.67 save percentage, which isn't good, but he did an admirable job for being forced into a situation that he probably shouldn't have been in. And Dylan Ferguson was the 5th goalie that got into the end of the 3rd period against the Edmonton Oilers. The Vegas Golden Knights literally had to sign him out from the Kamloops Blazers on emergency contract just because they had no more goalies in the system. So crazy experience for him last year.
Well, and the only other team that could have that claim last year, of course, was the Chicago Blackhawks. We had that incredible emergency goalie backup story with 10 saves. But Marc-Andre Fleury, really, if he could stay healthy this year, this Vegas team's looking like I think they're going to have poised to have another good repeat performance. Of course, Subban wasn't even picked during the expansion draft. He was picked up off waivers out of the Boston system. They ended up trading Picard away, who apparently today is in the news for maybe getting shopped around again by the Toronto Maple Leafs. But this goaltending, even Subban and Dansk, when they both played last year, looked really solid, and I think it really has to do with the way the system and the team is in front of them. So what a great thing for Fleury, to face fewer shots or make easier saves. But I want to touch on, before we get into the prospects, that first round of the playoffs between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, even though it was so low scoring, was so exciting to watch. It was one of my favorite playoff series this year. The goaltending battle between Quick and Fleury was unlike something I haven't seen since the days of Curtis Joseph and Ed Belfour playing against each other. And it was just incredible to watch, the 1-0 games, the 2-1 games, and just the drama of it was so incredible to watch. And then, of course, they went on to beat the Sharks after with, again, riding Fleury's back with all those magnificent saves. So let's get into some of their prospects. They obviously, through a lot of the trades that they made at the expansion draft, they accumulated a ton of draft picks in 2017 as well as in 2018. And they have definitely some great prospects that are coming up. There's even potentially the first 2 I'm going to talk about may make this team right out of training camp this year. So let's get into it. Their very first pick they ever took, which Canuck fans were surprised about because they didn't. The Canucks did not take this guy, but Cody Glass, sent him in and out of the WHL for the Portland Winterhawks. Last year ended up getting 102 points and another 13 points in 12 games in the playoffs. Ton of offensive potential, but he's also known to be able to be a two-way player, and in the playoffs, his offensive production did slow down to a halt, even though he still had more than a point a game. They were hoping to get a little bit more out of him for that. But, I mean, things got tight checking. He's still a good overall player. He plays a 200-foot game. Definitely has a chance to crack this lineup out of training camp. But with his age, I have a feeling they'll continue to hold him back just a little bit longer and potentially get him in some games in the AHL. Right after that, they drafted centerman Nick Suzuki, who has even higher offensive potential than Cody Glass. Played for the Owen Sound team in the OHL this year. I can't remember what Owen Sound's called. Are they the Owen Sound Attack or something like that?
I should know this because Gadovich played for them. Owen Sound.
I've got they are the Owen Sound Attack. So
yeah.
He ended up getting 100 points in 64 games and another 12 points in 11 games in the playoffs, and got basically the Defensive Play Forward of the Year award in the OHL for his two-way play. In that first round, they had a third pick, for which they took defenseman Eric Brandstrom out of the Swedish Hockey League. He ended up in 44 games against men last year, getting 15 points, and is listed on many sites as their number one NHL prospect, and definitely has a shot to crack this team this year. Just after he got drafted in the early second round, they drafted another defenseman, Nicholas Haig, who you and I were looking at the stats and just amazed. This guy played for the London Knights last year in the OHL. He's listed actually as a defensive defenseman, but had 35 goals and 78 points in 67 games as a defensive defenseman. They said he's got a complete game offensively, defensively. He's used to play on the power play and starts on most penalty kills. He was named the OHL Defenseman of the Year last year and has huge upside. So with that, I'll get you to touch on a few of your favorite prospects, and then we'll wrap this up.
All right. So, just to touch on Brandstrom, I think I was really impressed. He was probably like that big three for Sweden at the World Juniors with Dahlin and Timothy Liljegren. Just watching his game, he'll fit perfectly when he gets into Vegas' lineup. He's a great puck mover. He skates really well. Even being a smallish defenseman, I can't wait to see that guy in the NHL. To get to some of my guys I have, Zach Whitecloud, who was a college signing towards the end of the year, had 19 points in 36 games in the NCAA, and ended up getting into one NHL game at the end of the season. I think he'll be primed for the American League this year. Another defenseman, Jake Bischoff, who was a seventh-round pick by the New York Islanders, but I believe they got him either through trade or in the expansion draft. Had 23 points in 69 games in the American League. And also Thomas Heika, who they signed over from Europe last year, had 48 points in 50 games in the American League, and gone to 10 NHL games and had 3 points. He could be a potential guy that could crack into that bottom six potentially, just with all that offensive upside that he has. And another guy that had a really good year, as in his mid-20s, but sort of a fringe player that could go up and down, is TJ Tynan, who had 15 goals, but 60 points in 70 games in the American League. But he could be a guy that's already past his NHL opportunity, sort of like a guy like Reed Boucher with the Canucks, who's had all these great numbers in the American League, but hasn't been able to make that transition full-time to the NHL.
Just a couple more prospects I'll hit on before we move on. They're really high on a centerman named Ben Jones, who they got in the seventh round in 2017. He might be the steal of the draft is what they're calling it, but he played for the Niagara Ice Dogs last year, ended up with 79 points in 68 games, but he's also listed as a solid two-way forward, can play both ends of the ice very well. heavily relied on in Niagara last year with the ice time that they gave him to look after both ends of the ice. And then first-round draft pick from this year, Ivan Morozov, who was in the MHL out of St. Petersburg, had 23 points in 30 games and will be, I'm sure, moving up to the KHL this year, if not coming over, after he's done trying out for who knows, he might be able to be eligible for the Chicago Wolves. I'm not sure how that works for Russian-born players. So last year, Vegas first in the Pacific Division, 109 points. Where do you see them finishing this year?
I see them finishing in second in the Pacific Division, just behind the Sharks. But I still wouldn't be surprised if they repeat as the Pacific Division champions. But yeah, I'd like to see if they can repeat what they did this past year. Even though I think with Pacific, with only having like a few teams I see as like potential big picks for the playoffs for Stanley Cup contenders, I think Vegas will make the playoffs in second in the division and could get to that second or third round this year.
Yeah, I see them repeating pretty close to what they did last year. I think 100 points plus would be a good season again for them. I don't think it's out of the question for them to get 110 to 115 points. I think they actually will win the division again this year ahead of San Jose, only because I like their team chemistry a lot better. They have checkers, they have grinders, they have toughness, they have defensive capabilities, they have offensive capabilities. This is a very well-coached team, and I can see them having a lot of success. But the biggest thing this year is they're not going to be able to take teams by surprise. But the problem is a lot of teams on the road still have to go into Vegas to play them. So they will catch teams by surprise just because depending on what goes on in Vegas will sometimes stay in Vegas. But hopefully you enjoyed our show today. Make sure you give us a like on Facebook or leave us a comment. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Matt, what do you got for us?
No, I just want one big shout out. My dad turned 50 today, the big 5-0. Happy birthday, Dad. We'll see if you watch today to see see if you hear the shout out. But yeah, the half century mark today.
Well, if he gets that, I've known him now and played with him for about 21 years now. We've played together. And your dad, Ron, great goaltender. I still think he's better than some of these emergency call-ups that get pulled in the NHL games. Maybe one day he still will get his shot, for even if it's just for 30 seconds. But happy birthday, Ron. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Make sure you like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow with our 31 teams in 31 days as we're getting near the end, and we're going to continue with the Washington Capitals, the Stanley Cup champions. I'm excited. Hope you guys are. Hope you join us tomorrow. Have a great evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow.